Hi, hi, everybody. So. I am determined to get to chapter 15 tonight, so we only have to get through this much. We're so good at going quickly. All right. I was going to start in chapter 8 because, are we okay?
Yeah.
Because that is where we begin to get all of these kind of random like characters popping in and out. And we've talked about this before, but it's certainly one of the things that some people have trouble keeping up with. But I think that McBride is doing this on purpose. Why do you think? What are your ideas about this? This chapter 8 is when we're introduced to paper. Patty Millicent, known as newspaper, paper for short. And she's holding court at the grocery store. And it's at this point that then you get this long kind of convoluted story about Big Soap and Fatty and how Big Soap knocks Fatty's tooth out. And it is sort of chaotic. But reading this again, which may not be helpful in the sense that, you know, it's hard to read a book and then have students and then say to them, I swear you'll like it so much better the second time. Which is a hard thing to kind of pull off. But I think he's doing this on purpose because from this point forward, we keep getting introduced to a number of people whose characters aren't really fleshed out. And in this one chapter, we get Paper, we get Fatty, we get Big Soap, we get Enzo, then we get Rusty, then we get, as we move towards the end, we get Miggy. So my feeling is, this is on purpose. Why could he be doing this, do you think? Were any of you thrown off by it?
When I read it,
Yeah,
first thing I thought that made me think of Dickens. That Dickens brings a lot of them back into the plot, which our friend here does not. The other thing I thought, and it's just a thought, I think sometimes he just tries to convey the mad rush of life. These are people he really met, and I don't want to go to my grave without having told y'all about this woman teacher from Belmont that came in and taught us a bunch of weeks.
I'm getting a whole book. Yes,
I don't want to let that slide. I'm gonna talk about that person. Just to convey or try to convey the texture and multiplicity of humanity.
I think you could be right. In the sense that this is the point at which the focus goes from a few to many. And I love that you said it's sort of Dickens-like because many reviewers have pointed out they see McBride as a Dickens-like writer in the sense that he's so inclusive when he's writing about community. I also like that statement that he's trying to show you sort of, the myriad of people that make up a community. And he starts making these comments, and you'll have these characters sort of come in and then disappear. But one of the things I noticed this time is that they do play specific functions. The problem is, do you want to make a list, like a grocery list, and try to kind of, figure them out as you go forward? Why is paper important? Somebody said last week, I all that great stuff about paper, and I'm going, really? Okay, who is paper?
She knows all the news around town, so she's paper.
Very good. So I'm on 106. We know that Shona has decided to hide Dodo, that the state of Pennsylvania wants to get a hold of him. And all of a sudden, Paper, whose real name is Patty Millicent, who's known as Newspaper, but they call her Paper for short. And she's actually someone that wields a little power in this space. What's her power? Do you remember?
She knows everything.
Yes. How does she know everything? You're this close.
Because of where her house is.
Because, yes, but you're missing a big one. So on 106, it says,
All the men talk to her.
Yes.
So pretty.
Yeah. The men tell her.
Oh, the men.
And so all of a sudden, we go from kind of one central female character, Chona, and then we have Addie, who just sort of quietly serves, right? To all of these other women who now kind of come in and out. And I want you to keep an eye on them. Here's her power. It was her effect on the male species, her beauty, her easy laughter, glimmering eyes, and instant smile for every stranger she met made her a magnet for men. Men spilled their guts to her. And this is going to be important because it's not just Black men. On the next page, it tells you white men found her irresistible, which is why she held no lucrative maid's job. I'm retired from day's work, she told friends with a laugh. Too much trouble. The men grope and the women mope. And so she does laundry. So on the one hand, in some kind of fake social hierarchy, she's a laundress, which would put her low. But all the people of power come to her and tell her their secrets.
They're dirty linen.
That's right. Why is that going to matter?
There'll be some ugly secrets that come up here directly.
Yes, good. And she is going to become one of the cogs in the big wheel in terms of how are we going to actually get Dodo back? And she does that through information. Everybody knew that Dodo was doomed anyway. He was Addie's nephew, the child of her late sister Thelma. The special school, which everybody knew wasn't a school at all, but rather the horrific Pennhurst Sanatorium up the road in Spring City, was just another injustice in a world full of them. So why dwell on it? Plus, papers gossip that Saturday was too juicy to ignore. So then she tells this great sort of side story that doesn't really seem to connect to moving the narrative forward, which I think for some reason, or for some people can be, distracting. But in a minute, we're gonna see how Soap and Fatty actually are going to play a role. But we also know that paper is willing to sort of do some scouting, you know what I mean? To figure out who's trying to get Dodo and how is that going to work. We also kind of do get this first introduction to Hemlock Grove, which is also going to play a role. So he's sort of just sprinkling things through these stories. And I just want to point some of this out because I do think essentially these little nuggets are going to add up. But you got to keep up with it. Do you see what I mean? All right. Now, I do want to spend a minute on the robin and the sparrow, because for me, it's one of the most interesting chapters, especially about Chona. So the robin and the sparrow, and we were kind of wrapping up last week here, we get Chona's father's story and Bernice's father's story. And the fact that when the Hobbit Ahim is laid again, it's by Bernice's father. So the person who puts the cornerstone in the temple is the black man. But of course, he has a tragic end. But these girls are best of friends. So I'm on 133, and I have a couple of really hard questions tonight. The first one is, so these girls are inseparable all the way through high school, which is a long time, really. And what we know, and I'm on 133, is that Bernice is called a sparrow. The one constant Chona loved was the sound of Bernice's voice. At home, Bernice sang like a bird. She had a gorgeous, soaring, beautiful soprano, a sorrowful sound full of sadness and longing. Bernice sang everywhere. In the yard as she weeded her mother's garden, on the porch as she swept, during the afternoons as she picked through the vegetables at the Heaven and Earth grocery store for her mother, her voice so clear and angelic that when Chona walked by the Second Baptist Church on Sundays with her mother, they would pause just to hear Bernice's voice soaring above the rest. Why is she called a sparrow?
I think at school.
Yes. And okay, this is one of the hard questions. I don't know what you're gonna do with it. Because until this point, Shona is like a rock star, isn't she, in the novel? Everyone loves her. She is the voice of unity, the one who keeps, sort of correcting Moshe when he starts to get too wrapped up in money and wanting to move. And everyone adores her. But all of a sudden we get this pocket story, and that I've decided, I've invented it. I'm gonna call them pocket stories, where she loves Bernice, yes, and they are best friends. And not only that, but Bernice is really talented. And not just a talented singer, we find out in a minute, she also, is really good with sewing. And the problem here is that the teacher is demanding that the children get up in front of the class, each child, and sing Polly Parrot ate the carrot, which I do not know, P.S. So she calls each student to the front of the
I kept
class.
wondering, is this your pedagogical style in the classroom?
Shame the students, good idea.
Make your students stand up one by one.
It works. Here's a cool thing I did today, pocket story. I was teaching Jungian psychology, and I was trying to explain the concept of the persona, which is the face that we show to the outer world. So then I went, oh my gosh, this is going to be so fun. So then I just started asking students the personas of each of their teachers, and they were so good at it. And they could even tell. And this actually connects, because the Shona that we have seen throughout this novel until this moment literally walks without fear, yes? And not only walks without fear, she is challenging, she is educated, she is opinionated. She has like these masculinized qualities that don't even really fit with her, and she just owns it. Here we have the teacher who calls each child to the front, and Bernice refused to sing. Why do you think that happens?
She's a very closed up person. That's her personality.
Maybe. I do think that's part of it.
Does she already know to hate the teacher?
It says, she called each student to the front of the class and played the song, demanding that each child sing. If the child sang, she labeled them a robin. If they didn't, they were a sparrow. Shona became a robin easily, hopping to the front of the class and singing in a clear, strong voice. But Bernice,
The only black face in the class.
thank you.
Yeah.
The only black face in the class, when summoned, refused to sing. You're a sparrow, the teacher announced. Sit. Such a great 1930s teacher. Love, love, love. And then we learn that Shona was listening to Bernice sing, and that Bernice sings in the choir at the Second Baptist Church. So Polly Parrot ate the carrot probably wasn't Bernice's kind of song. And what we also learn here is that when Bernice sings, you can hear pain and sorrow, which is, of course, the definition of the blues. But she has this beautiful voice When Bernice sat down, Shona piped up, "Bernice is not a sparrow, she's a robin." And then, of course, they had to go to the principal's office. So these are best friends. Over time, the space between them lessened. Shona showed Bernice how to play pinochle, which she learned from watching her father. Bernice taught Shona how to make thick wool quilts that kept the cold out. I'm on 134. Their relationship lasted all the way through high school as they shadowed each other. For neither joined any club or sport. They had to work at home. So then they're assigned a dress to make. Bernice's is clearly the most beautiful dress in the class. And what happens?
Teacher
Teacher rips it out.
The teacher rips it up. Why?
Because she's a violent student.
So there's the problem. On the one hand, well, she ripped it up because she didn't follow directions.
That was
But
her
neither,
excuse.
but neither did John.
Probably not.
Now, what's fascinating, and here's the hard question, is that Bernice did not return to school that day, or next, or ever. She stayed inside, rarely appearing. For Shona, the day Bernice Davis closed off the world was the beginning of her own adulthood.
Well, she blamed Shona because she said that Shona made her do the wrong speech.
But trying to realize long before that, the Bernice was closed off. It says that right after the sparrow thing. So she realized for the first time Bernice was bottled up inside. It's something that was closed.
Does Bernice, okay, does Shona behave like this anywhere else in this?
And people like what?
So from this moment forward, then
She lets it go.
she lets her go.
Yeah, she never lets anything happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't speak for years and years, even though their yards are connected. What is up with that? Why do you think that happens? It says, from the moment Bernice no longer shows up, for Shona, the day Bernice Davis closed off the world was the beginning of her own adulthood. For the realization that lay before her had begun to clamp down on her. And she could see Chicken Hill and the town for what they really were. She began to have opinions about what lay ahead and to see the limitations of her own life too. Her mother wanted her to marry a young Orthodox Jew from Reading. She'd found he was nice enough, blah, blah, blah. She saw the broken marriages of the town's Jewish community, the miserable housewives, the frustrated husbands. She had dreamed of leaving Chicken Hill after graduating from high school and even had a few tentative plans in that direction. But when Moshe wandered into her father's basement and walked love into her life, he changed everything. Here was a man who wanted her to be full, who never blocked the entrance to the doors of knowledge and growth and passion in life's reckoning, who brought her books and records and music. When she married him, she forgot about Bernice and the Davises who lived next door, for life took over. The weird chapter. Because everything in this book so far has been all about Shona. Oh, yes? What happens here? it is so out of the character as it's been drawn. Am I right or wrong? So how do we explain it? No, you can't do that. Why? What do you think is happening right here? Look. She had her own life and no children to show for it, other than a hasty nod to Bernice, whose increasing brood of lovely children passed through her store, and were quiet, beautiful shadows like their mother, and an occasional laugh with Bernice's brother Fatty, who never changed. Chona had no room to see to Bernice's life. What? Everything about Chona is about the neighbor, serving others, to serve. And she had no room to see Bernice's life.
Well, a few lines above, it says, after she married, she forgot about Bernice and the Davises who lived next door. Her life took over.
Yeah. You believe that? She lives 10 feet away.
And she was very hurt by Bernice getting mad at her and saying that it was her fault. And that was the first person that ever really broke her heart, kind of, because they were such close friends, and then Bernice just shut her off, and so she had to do the same thing to mend her heart, to keep, to go forward.
I don't know. Except
So sad though.
there are a couple things I'm noticing, and I'm not sure. First of all, I think for the first time, this is how. For me, it humanizes Chona in a way I haven't seen before in this novel. She is not perfect.
Not right this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And on the one hand, I think a lot of times when we see a character who, for me, is fully fleshed out this way, we don't like that weakness, because she has been la, 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 la the entire time. And all of a sudden, there are also a couple of things going on. One is, for me, she's finally humanized. That she's not perfect. She's a person just like Moshe. At the same time, she and Bernice were shadows. Did you ever have that best friend? Did you have that best friend? Maybe you still do. They were shadows. But when she meets Moshe, it says that when Moshe wandered into her father's basement and walked love into her life, he changed everything. He was a man who wanted her to be full. Being full is not the same as a shadow. It's like the opposite. Now, the other thing is, while she is moving forward into this grown-up life, and Bernice, she thinks, or as far as we can tell from the narrator, is just sort of locked away. Okay, P.S. She ain't locked away all the time.
You having all these babies.
But we don't get any information about that, do we?
Even her brother won't.
Because it's not in Chona's vision. So it's a really fascinating moment to me, because for the first time, and you're going to see how I'm going to lead you to the one that's really going to make you mad. For the first time, there's a chink. The other thing, which also fully humanizes Chona for me, is that while she's trying not to pay attention to Bernice, what's going on over there?
We're children.
Yeah, that's a.
8 children. And Shona?
So children.
None. And so this is when the narrator for me is a little suspicious. Because we are getting this backstory kind of focalized through Shona's experience, but we're not getting any explanation. Shona had no room to see to Bernice's life. How Bernice procured her children, with whom, why she had so many, or the manner in which she led her life, Shona never inquired. Does that sound like our Shona? Not one bit. Her own life was full, yet she felt incomplete. She had no children. Go
I
ahead.
was hearing little echoes of Rachel and Leah story in this.
Say more.
Well, I mean.
So,
Yeah, so. Jacob goes, falls in love with Rachel, Laban tricks him to marry the older daughter. As I used to say, I didn't want my 14-year-old daughter Leah realizing God gave a compensating gift for pulchritude, for lack of pulchritude, fertility, in the Bible. And that, Leah has all the children and poor Rachel is barren.
yeah.
Yeah.
And look at the rest of that paragraph. She had no children. Bernice, on the other hand, had plenty. Bernice was rich
Right.
with children. Yet she had blamed Shona for her French stitched dress anyway, which was not true. The whole business was too complicated and too old, like the overgrown roots of an ancient tree. It is fascinating to me. Shona, the one who will, trade punches with the Jewish teachers. This is too complicated. So it's a fascinating play here because it makes Shona not perfect. And we have to be careful because she's so kind of elevated through the novel that a lot of people miss it. She doesn't even want to acknowledge Bernice. So she's becoming like a lot of the people around her, even though in the rest of the book, she's not like the people around her. But then look at the next paragraph, one sentence. But now she had a problem.
She knew.
Shona had her own child now. He wasn't hers, but he was the closest thing to one. For the past 4 months, the deaf boy Dodo had been a dream. It didn't matter what the other congregants in the shul called him when she wasn't around. He'd come as a matter of conscience, but now was a matter of love. He was smart, sensitive. He saw things other people didn't. Even without his hearing, he understood everything. He was sharp, bright, and necessary.
And what?
Necessary. What about that, Hank? It's a weird sentence, I'm right? Or a weird word, it's a phrase.
Yeah,
What do you think is going on there?
Well, she talked about being incomplete,
Yes.
and if she has that completeness through her son, she can be complete.
And it's such a, I think you're exactly right. And it's such an interesting moment because once she has the child and the child is in danger, she immediately thinks of Bernice after years. So something is happening here. And what does Bernice do? Does she push her away? No, she says, make a hole. Make a hole in the, make a hole in the fence. When people come looking for them, just let them come in my yard. And then something gets completed. But watch the process that Chona goes through. He was sharp, bright, and necessary, and then goes to the next paragraph. Isn't that what Judaism should do? Bring light and reflection between cultures? All that high-handed talk of Judaism had seemed increasingly useless and distant as she grew older, until it folded neatly into the sunshine reality that arrived in the form of Dodo. Y'all, this is very important. The boy brought his own kind of light. She set him up in the back room of the store where she had frequently lain during her illnesses, and he brought light into the dark room in a way that vanquished pain from her memory. The silent, morose child who first arrived brought life anew. He was a spark, a whiz. He was 12 and learning his all boy things out of sight of others. He drew pictures, played with balloons. I'll go to the next page, and then I'm gonna make us move forward. 140. This is the end of that carryover paragraph. In 4 months, he had become a living embodiment of l'chaim, a toast to life, a boy living a life, something she'd wanted and prayed for ever since she was a girl who cared that he was Negro. He was hers. So what do you think is happening here with Chona? Do you get it? I think it's important. I think it might shift a little how we evaluate and see her. Because before Moshe, but then even after Moshe, so much of Chona is about words. Yes, it's about words. It's about language. It's about what you're supposed to do and supposed to be. And now this child is a life. And so much, it's sort of the practice which you preached in, right? She's been a preacher for so long. And now she is a mother. And she is terrified and weak. And all of those things are in the name of love. Yes? She has a problem. So she goes back to Bernice. And there's not even, there's not even conflict there or anything. It's just settled. Bernice didn't even let her finish, cut a hole in the fence where nobody can see it. She said, when the man from the state comes, put him in my yard while my kids are playing. One colored looks just like the other. Chona smiled and turned to Dodo to explain that he had Bernice's permission to slip into her yard, that in fact, she and the dear woman at the door had been friends at one time. But she was overwhelmed with confused emotion, for she'd also wanted to thank Bernice, to shake her hand, to hold her hand as she'd done when they were children, and say, "You're not a sparrow, you're a robin," and ask why she had not heard the sound of her singing for years, a voice that had opened up a world of understanding for her when she was a child. But before Chona could turn back to her, Bernice had closed the door and was gone. It's such a great chapter. Because Chona, in all of her wisdom, has a limited understanding. Just like the rest of us. And this child changes everything for her. But for you as a reader, it should also make you step back and go, huh, there's more to Jonah than I thought, because she's just so elevated. She wants to thank her. Too late, sister. But Bernice is still Bernice. Then we get to this next chapter, and here's where you're not. Why are you shaking your head?
Hated it.
Why?
It's just not fair, I guess, is what I'm.
Tell me what is not fair.
Don't think it's fair that they looked for Dodo. I don't think it's fair what happened to Shona. I just think that whole. It's just, I mean, they're doing it out of meanness. They're not doing it for any other reason. I thought this whole part was very sad.
Oh, yeah.
It's very sad.
Okay. All right, are you ready for this? You are smart and beautiful readers. And we did a beautiful job on sort of showing how Moshe, not always perfectly sympathetic. Yes? Doc is the star of chapter 10, the scrub shoe. And of course, we've already known he marches in the KKK parades, yes? But then, in this almost paired chapter, we get his backstory. Is there anything remotely sympathetic about him to you? Oh, I know it. I'm hearing John Bailey's head snap up. Anything?
I didn't pick up on it.
Nothing?
Maybe because of his
I
damage.
maybe too broad a brush. I didn't pick up on it.
He had a bad foot like she had, like Shona did. He tried when they were younger to get her to go to his shoemaker, and that's the only,
I guess his parents were so awful, but maybe that's my only empathetic,
yeah.
or at least his dad.
So I think that McBride is doing something really brave in this chapter. I don't know if it comes off, because I think there have already been clues embedded in the book that we are not going to like Doc. But when we begin chapter 10, he begins this way. Earl Roberts. He doesn't say Doc. This is Earl Roberts, known in Pottstown as Doc. And you begin to see how he and, his distant cousin or whatever are going to, Carl Boykins, are going to be involved in the Dodo situation. And we also know then that Doc and Carl are brought up in a really different way, in part because they are white. But then you also begin to get information about Doc. I'm on 151. He and Carl were not especially close in high school. So look at this nice balance. Bernice and Shona, shadows in high school. He and Carl were not especially close in high school, in part because Carl was tall and a good athlete, and all the girls loved him. Whereas Doc was a bookworm who'd had polio, which affected his left foot. The foot curled oddly and bore a cleft in the middle where toes 2 and 3 should have been. It ached from the time he was aware of it. When he was a child, his mother instructed him to always keep it covered, but it ached so much and no shoe fit well, so he ignored her orders as much as possible. He secretly felt his left foot didn't look that different from his right, but he learned a painful lesson in 1st grade. When he slipped his sock off in gym class, the boys saw his foot and howled, calling him Hoof.
Were devils identified by having a
Yeah.
cleft foot?
Uh-huh. He's a bookish boy. And rather than being part of the community of boys, he was marginalized because he was different. And if you're exactly right, on the one hand, if you read this description, his foot is not formed normally. And so on the one hand, if you could read this description and go, oh my God, I mean, that sentence, it ached all the time. And his mother saying, you gotta keep that covered up, you gotta keep that covered up, which is just signaling to him that he is different. But at the same time, it's a cloven hoof, which is an archetypal Satan figure. But then we find out he wants a girlfriend. And he wanted to hold hands and be a real couple. And what happens? She sees his foot, and what?
And then
That's the end of that. No more action for you, buddy. So,
But he also liked Jonah, and she was given the time of day.
he has this, and over in this chapter, I think it's 3 or 4 times, he's humiliated. Is there nothing sympathetic about this character to you? Why not?
Well, I don't know about the tall part, but I'm sure having fellows like Don and Bob, not everybody bats 1,000 with the women. Everybody's gonna get rejected. Everybody's gonna get their feelings hurt. It's part of the game.
But no, you're not playing, quite frankly, on a level playing field here. He wasn't rejected because he didn't have the moves or he wasn't whatever. He was rejected because his body was different from other people's body.
I'm not sure how different that would feel to you. I mean,
God, look at what these people say.
speaking from less than illustrious personal experience. I can tell you that when you get rejected, you don't think, at least you didn't reject me because I had no club foot, because I don't have a club foot. I'm being perfect. And she still rejected me. For reasons known only to the Lord.
He was destroyed. And it's one humiliation stacked up on another. Do I think he is a sympathetic character? Absolutely not. He becomes a terrible person. but he's a human being. And you can look at the forces that shape him in the same way that you can look at the forces that shape the other major characters. He is different, and he even has an affliction similar to Chona, and he goes after her, and she rejects him as well.
But the other characters overcome their issues where he continues, he feeds off of those.
Okay.
He doesn't,
And I know none of the
Doesn't get
women who
better.
read this thought, well, I don't understand why they rejected him, a nice guy like this.
I think
But he
it's
wasn't
clear,
nice.
but it's clear why he's rejected. From the time he is a child, he is different, and he's been told and reminded that he's different. And rather than becoming a Chona, that resentment builds and builds and builds. And there are ways in which he tries to compensate, or maybe overcompensate, by aligning himself with the ickiest kinds of people and ideologies. But a lot of that action, I think you could argue, comes out of pain and rejection. So the reason I think it's a masterful stroke, that is not to defend him in any way.
And in the 20s and 30s, the Klan in lots of northern cities was the establishment, the in crowd.
Yes,
It's belonging, it's.
yes. And because, you know, in the 20s, and then like just a minute, we're gonna be in the 30s, this is the height of segregation. And P.S., that wasn't just in the South, right? The height of segregation in all of its ugliest manifestations. And what he starts doing is aligning himself with power. It's not healthy, it's not kind, but if you are powerless, can you at least see? Because I think McBride would not like for any of these characters not to be seen on the spectrum of human beings. This is how human beings are. This is how they are made. This is how they become. They're not perfect. He goes a really bad way, a way that is not unlike so many other kinds of people. And you get that on 160, and it's so creepy because you get this very kind of grown-up viewpoint of what Doc becomes and what he represents. Hold on. His disappointments grew. He marries this woman he's not that interested in. But when he goes back to Pottstown, he starts going, oh my gosh, look what's happened here. All these different people, Greeks doing this, Italians doing this, Black people doing this, and now Jews were buying homes. And what's more, they were polluting the town's good white Christian teenagers with Black music brought to town by none other than Chona's husband, yet another Jew who owned not one, but two theaters. Where was America in all of this? Pottstown was for Americans. God had predestined it. The Constitution guaranteed it. The Bible had said it. Jesus, where was Jesus in all of this? Doc felt his world was falling apart.
We should come a long way, haven't we?
I wasn't gonna say it till you said it first. Because, and I think that's why, even though this book is, we're back in the 20s and 30s, look around. And you know, this is one of those conversations I have to have with students a lot because, you know, I teach Southern history, Southern literature, Southern culture. And they use broad brushstrokes to measure the world. And so they think all Southerners who were connected to slavery were evil, period. Evil. And then once you sort of start cracking open and going, okay, let's take this apart and let's look for people in this. People are people are people. And Doc is disappointed and humiliated, and it turned into rage and ugliness. But he's still, I think, humanized, even if it's for just this chapter. Because of course, what happens next is he essentially assaults Shona.
While she's unconscious.
Yeah.
Even better.
After he gives her a heart attack.
Yes, now. I have two things I want you to think about, because we have 2 weeks. We can do this, because it wraps up fast. Here are 2 things I want you to think about. We know what happens to Dodo. He goes into Penhurst, and that's where we'll start. I want to talk for a few minutes about Monkey Pants. But then I want to get to, because I think all of these are gonna start to come back together. But then I want to talk about Nate Love. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I want to talk about, and so this will be your homework guide. Man, where's Donovan? These are usually things I like to pick at him out.
Oh,
Where is Barb? So I want to talk about at some point, because I don't understand, I know the whale, the imagery of the whale.
Oh, 100%. We'll get
I
there.
don't want to pretend like I understand that, I just,
We'll get there.
okay.
I want to begin with Monkey Pants and work our way to the end of chapter 14, where Nate gets drunk on moonshine and whispers something. So Guy is going to explain to us Proverbs 20:10. The chapter is called Differing Weights and Measures, which comes from Proverbs 20:10. I'll read it to you and then we can wrap up. Differing weights and differing measures, both of them alike are an abomination to the Lord. What does that even mean? And how does it connect? Because now we have to start putting this tapestry back together. What does that even mean? Differing weights and measures?
It
It's
can be a way that,
unequal.
What do you mean?
Go ahead.
it can be a way that to cheat people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes? What were you gonna say?
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's the injunction is overall about fairness and practices.
Ha-ha,
And so there's a stream throughout Torah about not cheating, not having, and the unequal throws us off, but it's about, you say it's weighs 10, but it actually weighs, 7.
yes.
And so it's cheating, yeah.
So Fatty hears this. Fatty, I think it's Fatty or the friend. Can't remember at the second. One of them goes, hey, maybe we can get Dodo out of there. And we get this backstory on Nate. And what he whispers is terrifying to them. And what he says is the proverb. And so weights and measures, fairness. What is the fair response to what they have done to Dodo? And how does that go to me telling you 3 weeks ago, we're gonna have a conversation about justice? What is the fair and equal response? Because to those men, it's not, oh yeah, man, yeah. They're like, oh. Yes, they're terrified. So let's start there. This book is,
Donovan doesn't know a lot about property, so I'm glad.
I'm actually very impressed. My husband Paul loves Proverbs and he knew immediately where it was from, and I went, but I don't get it. Like, what does that even mean? Or, okay, now, and then of course, I had to look up some Bible commentary, and then kind of go, oh, and then I went, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Justice.
Yeah.
So what did we learn? Be kind to everyone. We're all imperfect people.
I was out today and on Hillsborough Village, and somebody had a bumper sticker, and I live by bumper stickers. And this one said, "Be kind, we're all idiots down here."
We're all idiots down here.
But we're docs. At least we can feel better. You guys have a good week. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you,
Your
Sue.
Bible